is Ellen Wasfy of the League of Women Voters of Kent County. On behalf of the League and its co-hosts, the American Association of University Women Dover Branch, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People Central Delaware Branch, number 2028, the Central Delaware Alumni Council of the Pan-Hellenic Council, and Restoring Central Dover. It is my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual candidates night for 2020. Let me stress that the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. Tonight's program hopefully will afford us the opportunity to hear a discussion of issues and opinions which will enable us to make more informed choices on Election Day. This evening, candidates for state representative from Kent County were invited to participate in a forum. However, the League of Women Voters is required to abide by regulations set forth by the Federal Elections Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Internal Revenue Service. These regulations are intended to ensure nonpartisanship by nonpartisan groups sponsoring appearances of candidates running for public office. Consequently, should only one candidate for a particular office be present, even if that candidate is running unopposed, we cannot provide the opportunity for him or her to address the audience as part of the formal debate. There must always be at least 2 points of view represented for each office. This evening, 2 candidates for state representative are affected by these regulations and cannot participate in this forum. The opponent of Ms. Cheryl Precourt, Republican, in the 32nd District declined the invitation to appear, as did the opponent of Ms. Rachel King, Democrat, in the 33rd Representative District. I see that Mr. Kofrigi is here, so we will continue. Let us now turn to the format of this evening's debate. The candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statements outlining issues of particular importance to their campaigns. League of Women Voters member Dr. Phyllis Edamatsu and Carolyn Brinkley will act as timekeepers. They will notify the candidates when they have 15 seconds left and when their time is up. In fairness to both candidates, we request that they observe these time limits. The initial speaking order was determined beforehand through the method of random choice by the League of Women Voters Candidates Night Committee. Following the initial presentation, the candidates will have the opportunity to respond to some questions sent in by the public via email prior to tonight's event, and some questions posed by the League of Women Voters on its Vote 411 website. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question and 1 minute for rebuttal if desired, but they are limited to only 1 rebuttal per question per candidate. Both candidates will have the chance to respond to each question, and we ask them to direct their comments to the viewing audience and not to each other. One final word regarding tonight's presentation. Organizing such an event would not have been possible without the conscientious efforts of civic-minded citizens who spend hundreds of hours planning and attending to details. Our gratitude goes to the League of Women Voters Candidates Night Committee, Jean Bauer, Gwen Elliott, and Mary Merritt, who contacted and followed up with the candidates directly. Joan and Fred Brookelman, who formatted and issued the letters of invitation and debate guidelines to all the candidates. Beverly Jackson, who coordinated candidate responses and fielded questions from the public. And Marianne Coe and Chandra Owens, who contributed their technology skills to enable us to host and publicize this virtual forum. We'd also like to recognize Dr. Mary Kay Eggers, President of the League of Women Voters of Kent County, Jana Tomaszewski, President of AAUW Dover, Ann Smith, President of the Central Delaware Branch of NAACP, Chandra Owens, President of the Central Delaware Pan-Hellenic Alumni Council, and Shonda Jackson, President of Restoring Central Dover, for volunteering their organizations to co-sponsor this event. And now Let me introduce the candidates for state representative from the 34th District. We will start out with his introductory statement with Mr. Ade Kufariji, Democrat. Mr. Kufariji.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I greatly appreciate it. I'm Ade Kufariji. I'm running for state representative in the 34th District. The reason I'm running is to make sure that the interest of everyday citizens in the 34th is well represented. I want to make sure that our kids receive proper education. One of the problems I see in the education world is everybody's an expert except educators. So the system, I believe the education system is full of great ideas, but everyone that's not trained to be an educator, and it's a problem, it's causing problems. I'm running to make sure that I'm the voice for people that have no voice. I want to speak for senior citizens that have no special interest representing them. I want to make sure that our kids have the health care that they need, and that we continuously support funding for the programs that make sure that their health care is taken care of. The third reason I'm running is, as a finance guy, I really want to make sure that, that we manage the budget challenges that exist, and I know will be forthcoming as we hit the fiscal year 2022 state budget with the impact that the pandemic has had on the system. I'm a Kent County resident. I've been living in Kent County for the last 32 years. I have two children, both graduates of local school district, one at Polytech and one at Cesar Rodney. So I'm very familiar with our system. And again, I'm in my 28th year in state government, and I've worked in most of the largest state organizations. So I understand the impact that the decisions that are made by the General Assembly would have on the constituents and the citizens, both of our state and of the district.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. Of course, there will be plenty of time during the Q&A where you will be able to expand on all your ideas. And we'll now turn to Representative Lyndon Yarick, Republican.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and all the other groups who have worked to put this together. It's the first probably virtual debate that's ever happened with the League of Women Voters. And thank you for all your efforts to put that together. Second thing that I'd just like to share that it's been a privilege to be a part of these debates now. I think this is my fourth one. And this will be the first time that I haven't had a chance to see Don Harshberger at the event. Don passed away Christmas Day, 2019. The relationship Don and I had that in regard to issues and policies and government, perhaps we could have been at we're at polar opposites. But I think it's a great example of how as human beings, we're more alike than we are different. We both had a very strong affinity towards Penn State and Penn State football. We had much more in common than the differences that came out during debates and issues. And with that, I'd just like to continue our thoughts. Not quite a year yet, but Don was a great guy, committed to this cause, and to Mary for all her hard work continuing on with this. I just wanted to share that I still think of Don, especially now as we're getting ready for Penn State football. The third piece that why I'm running for re-election, I've had the privilege to be the state representative in the 34th District now for 3 terms, running for my 4th term. As I look back on the information when I first got started back in 2014, my ideas and principles really haven't changed at all. First and foremost, it's about public safety. I think any branch of government or any, whether it be at the national level or the state level, the most important priority is to try to provide a safe and secure environment for its residents. Second, job creation. We need to work together to promote our leading industries, being agriculture, small businesses, and tourism. And third, our fiscal responsibility. We can't grow the state of spending faster than the rate of our economy is growing. So those 3 things is why I'm running again for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. We will now turn to the questions that have been submitted either by the public or appeared on the League of Women Voters 411 website. The first questions deal with the electoral process and voting. So we'll start with the first one. This year, Delawareans can vote by mail due to COVID-19. Would you support continuing the vote by mail option for future Delaware elections? If yes, what modifications would you make to the current mail-in voting process? And we'll start out with Representative Yarick.
Thank you for the question. Similar to the vote by mail, the first piece of legislation that I had passed was to modify the absentee ballot process. At the time, it required two different classifications to receive a notary in regard to their statement for receiving the ballot. I thought that was unnecessary, and that was the first piece of legislation that I had successfully passed to eliminate the need for notarization. In regard to vote by mail, when that legislation came up, I voted against it. Perhaps I would have voted for it if several amendments would have been added to it. Specifically, the one that I suggested was that to add a photocopy when one was requesting a ballot, a photocopy of a valid ID with a current address which would match the ballot. Similar, if you vote in person, you have to show identification. The amendment was struck down, and that was one of the main reasons why I voted against the bill. If we can add modifications, amendments to the bill, if it comes back again, perhaps I would be in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. Mr. Koforici.
Yep, voting by mail, I think it's working. I mean, of course, it's our first run at it. I think it gives people an option. They have the option now to be able to get to vote without actually physically, standing in line to vote. So I totally support voting by mail. Obviously, we have to study this, and there's always room to improve processes. So until we get to the end, and we get feedback from how it was seen by the public and also by the elections department to say, all right, this worked or this didn't work. But at the surface level with where we're at and for the pandemic we're dealing with, absolutely, I think it's appropriate, and I totally support it for the future as well, with, of course, modifications as we see the need to make changes or improvements to it, but absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Koforici. Our next question has to do with early voting. The Delaware General Assembly passed HB 38 and HB Amendment 1, and an act to amend Title 15 of the Delaware Code relating to early voting. This act will allow early in-person voting in Delaware on at least 10 days before an election. This bill would take effect in 2022 after passing a second time in the 2021 legislative session. Will you support this legislation? And this time we'll start with Mr. Koforici.
Absolutely, why not? They're still going to have to follow the same requirements for voting. So why not? If I want to do it 10 days early, I might have other things going on election day, and especially some of us have the opportunity to be able to have a day off to be able to exercise our civic duties. But for people that may not have that opportunity to have 10 days leading up to be able to go in and put their cast their votes, absolutely, I would absolutely support it.
Thank you, Mr. Koforici. Representative Yarick.
Thank you. If the vote by mail legislation would pass, I don't know if we need to continue watering down the actual voting in-person opportunity. A quick story, one of the very first times that I ran, a gentleman got out of a car with a walker, had to walk 100 plus feet to get to his polling place. And this was a primary. He was a veteran. He said, I fought for this right to vote. And I don't think we should ever take it lightly, that ability to vote in person on a single day where everybody can be a part of that engagement. Again, we're open-minded to looking at the absentee ballot process as well as the vote by mail. But early voting, again, is going to also add additional expense to the process, perhaps additional confusion. And let's try to keep the sanctity of that election day an honor and a privilege that people have the right to participate with.
Thank you. I'd like to insert a question here. There have been several efforts, or at least ideas, to make Election Day a national holiday. How would both of you feel about that possibility? Mr. Koforici.
Why not? I mean, it's one of the tenets of our democracy. We get to pick who would lead us. why wouldn't we support the idea that nothing gets in the way of people being able to get out and exercise their right? Why would we put a barrier in front of them so I can say, oh, I would like to vote, but guess what? I happen to work shifts or whatever that cover the entire election period. I know it goes from about 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And of course, it's easy for some of us to say, no, hey, how can that be a problem? But there are people that have jobs, responsibilities. If I have 2 jobs, I might not be able to make it because of shift work. So to make it a national holiday so people can get out and exercise their right, absolutely, I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. Representative Yarick.
I believe in state rights. I'd allow each state to make that decision versus a national policy towards it. If there's a work obligation, whatnot, there's an opportunity to request an absentee ballot for that individual right now. So instead of a national day off, I would allow the 50 states to decide if they want to do that at their own state level.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. The next question deals with the districting of where you vote and has to do with redistricting. Following the 2020 census, election district boundaries will be redrawn across the country. Do you think Delaware would benefit from having an independent redistricting commission? And please explain your position. We'll start this time with Representative Yarick.
Thank you for the question. There was legislation that was brought up, I believe 2 years ago, that would address that, and I opposed it. If we can't have the faith in the elected leaders in the process, that's one of their responsibilities. I think we should be disappointed with the people that we're putting into office who have that responsibility. For that reason, I favor the current process of having the party who is in power. They have that ability every 10 years to make those changes. I would be against having an outside commission coming in to look at it. If we can't elect reasonable, responsible adults for these positions, then we don't have the right people in those positions.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. Mr. Kufariji.
I'm fine with the redistricting, but I think the key issue there would be if we go with the party in power. That's where it becomes scary. So if I'm in power, so I want to go out and kind of redraw the line. So for the next 10 years, I would be the one that gets the most benefit out of it. I'd be slightly concerned about that. I wish I could say everybody does the right thing, and it wouldn't be a political move. It wouldn't be I can get more people in the General Assembly if I run the program because I'm the one in charge. So I don't mind if the elected or the party in power runs the process, but I would like some independent checks to make sure that it's not being unfairly administered. So short of being able to fairly manage that by the ruling party, I would absolutely support having an independent organization manage that.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. We have 4 questions now that deal with the issue of race relations in this country and the criminal justice system. So I'll start with the first question. If elected, what measures will you develop and/or support to increase community confidence in law enforcement personnel? We'll start out with Mr. Kufariji.
I think, there's a lot of great law enforcement officers, men and women, that do outstanding work without question, and we absolutely need them. But what we cannot close our eyes to is the idea that we have also elements, and in every organization, in every kind of profession, there are people that do well, there are people that don't do so well. So in this space, I think what needs to be developed is more of community relations. And I think the standards for selecting police officers needs to increase and be regulated. It's kind of the same way. I mean, I just don't wake up tomorrow and become a nurse. There are rules, there are licenses that I have to have. I spent several years being trained to be a nurse. There are things, there are processes and qualifications that I think we need to increase for police officers, and that's my first step.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. Representative Yarick.
Thank you. For 6 years, I've been an active participant with Delaware State Police Troop 3. town of Camden's police force and the town of Wyoming's police force. I can speak firsthand on experience of what they have done in regard to community policing, how they've reached out to build relationships through town halls, through community forums, through backpack school supply drives, through honorary commander programs, through national night outs, through walk a mile in my shoes, participation with town halls that I put on. I've seen firsthand the commitment that they have made to reach out to the community to build those relationships. In regard to improving the system, from working with local law enforcement, an officer shared with me suggestions, if I'm reelected, which I would, file legislation that would make it more difficult for an officer who has been excused in one state, having it more difficult for he or she to find employment as a law enforcement officer in other states.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. The next question also deals with this same topic. How can we ensure the accountability of our law enforcement officers when they make mistakes? Very similar to how doctors and nurses are held accountable for their actions when it impacts the lives of those in their care. We'll start out with Representative Yarick this time.
I believe the current processes in place are working in regard to an officer which, whether he or she is brought up for use of force or a complaint about use of force, there is a process that they are put through to justify and or discipline them for their actions. I think the system is working. I think the system has an opportunity to get improved. However, an officer is held accountable in regard to his or her actions. Another way to make an improvement is that I'm now in favor of using body cams. That comes from working with law enforcement. That initially I was concerned with the expense. However, from talking and working with them, they see it as an attribute, not a detriment. So that's another example of their willingness to step forward, do the right thing, hold themselves accountable, try to reduce the inactions or poor actions of a few officers, and have them have a disciplinary process.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. Mr. Kufariji.
Yes, I think we need an independent review board to be able to review the actions of when there's accusations of misconduct, to tell me to watch myself, and it's a close-knit family. Cops are close-knit, and they should be, because I mean they work in difficult situations and they need to know that the next person has their back. But at the same time, we can't let them go and extend to the place where they decide that, oh, well, if I mess something up, I'm just going to say, oh, it was an accident, or this happened, or that happened. We need an independent review board that can look at the actions that were taken and then be able to say, all right, based on what the rules are for engaging in this situation, it was the appropriate action taken. We need members of the community to be on such a review board, I think, to make sure that everything is done fairly and the investigation is fair and accurate and complete.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. Next question also deals with this issue. What measures do you propose to diminish racially fueled mass incarceration and eliminate re-entry barriers for citizens exiting the criminal justice system, such as being denied access to jobs and affordable housing? We'll start out with Mr. Kufariji this time.
A couple of things we need to do is definitely, I think we need to look at the opportunity, a methodology. Ultimately, expungement will be the ultimate goal for somebody that's trying to re-enter society, because as soon as they do a criminal background check, hey man, you have a record, you don't have access to a lot of things that gives somebody an opportunity to get a new stride in life. So and I'm sure we're gonna have to form a methodology for determining the levels of what the person was incarcerated for, so that somebody that just did, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna use a weird example here, forgery, and he had to go to jail for forgery, shouldn't have the rest of his life having a difficult time getting access to to life back in society. So determine the level of crime, maybe have categories for the levels of crimes, and then when they come out, determine the ones that can be quickly expunged so that they would have access back to society without their history holding them back.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. Representative Yarick.
I voted in favor of the recent legislation that made getting records expunged a lot, much more easier. I voted for legislation in the past that would ban the box having certain questions getting asked on employment applications. I was in favor of bail reform. I think there's modifications we need to make that I believe in giving the discretion to the judges. However, unfortunately, due to some recent examples, I think there needs to be some tighter reins put back on the judges with some difficult scenarios that have come back after bail was not properly set. We're continuing to support our correctional officers, our prisons in regard to vocational training, for fair punishment. As once individuals do that punishment, have their debt to society paid, they should have every opportunity to re-enter the workforce. To say that they're not re-entering or having that opportunity, I would have to see the evidence of that. Yeah, there are certain jobs they're going to be disqualified for. However, I think there's opportunities out there for those individuals.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. How do you believe that racial inequality can be reduced or eliminated in Delaware? We'll start out with Representative Yarick this time.
Racial inequality is going to be an individual decision. It's not going to get changed by a government action, a government piece of legislation. Really, it's going to come from the ground up. It's going to come from individuals treating individuals with dignity, honor, respect, regardless of their skin color, their gender. It's going to be led by our faith-based communities. It's going to be led by not-for-profit organizations. It's not going to get led by new legislation, by government mandates. First and foremost, it's going to come from individuals treating other individuals with dignity, respect, and honor.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. Mr. Kufariji.
Yes, I agree. I think that there's going to have to be, these are human decisions that people have to make. But it starts with communication. It starts with me getting to know my neighbor. You know, we're also busy these days. We live in a fast-paced world. Everybody's running. And sometimes people don't get to know other human beings. I don't have the 5, 10, 20 minutes to talk to you and actually understand a little bit about who you are. So in that aspect, I agree. But also, I think we also need to look at some of the systems and structures that we have in place that may result or may cause, people to see other people in certain lights. And when we look at the media, sometimes, if I look this way, and I get involved in an incident, the first thing somebody says is, oh yeah, he's a this, he's a that. When, okay, no, probably if you look around, everybody does it, but it just looks like, oh, but because I saw 2 or 3 people that look from this specific race, gender, whatever, then we assume that they're the culprits of the crime. So it's about just looking and, seeing people for human beings, not being grouped because you belong to whatever race or gender.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. We're now going to shift to a topic which is on everybody's mind these days, the pandemic that we're all dealing with. What else can we do statewide to keep the number of cases low and slow the spread of the coronavirus with all the information we now know? And we will start with Mr. Kufariji this time.
The best science has come up with is wear a mask. We've tried every option. They've looked at, does sunshine help kill the virus? Does this do it? Does that do it? In this moment, the only thing that has seemed to work is wear a mask and avoid crowding. Everybody maintains their 6 feet distancing, and if we can do that, if we can manage that, until we at least get the vaccine for this, we should try and support our fellow human beings, and again, wear a mask and socially distance. Those seem to be the easiest, obvious things to do. Wash your hands regularly. I think they say 20 seconds under the sink, under running water. Make sure that we keep our personal fluids to ourselves as much as possible, which is why the masks help a lot. So, I think if we can keep our fluids to ourselves, we have a better chance of staying alive and staying safe from the virus.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. Representative Yarick.
Thank you. When the the virus hit throughout the state, I did agree with the governor's perhaps 2 months, initial 2 months of how his actions and programs were put in place, that the intent was to bend the curve, lower the bar, look at hospitalizations, look at our intensive care units, and unfortunately look at the deaths. I think we've accomplished that by bending the curve, lowering the level. I'm for reopening the economy, the state right now. And I say that because I do believe in individuals being able to make conscientious decisions for their health, for their family's health, for their coworkers, for their community. You know, there's still requirements put on cigarettes and requirements on cars that indicate people should wear seatbelts or perhaps not to smoke. So yes, there's going to be people that unfortunately will not abide by common sense things, but I believe in individuals making the best possible choices. And the fact of the matter is, right now, to reopen the state, not everybody's going to come back to the same habits and practices they did back in January or February. So I think it's time to get back to full open with the state of Delaware.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. We shift now to looking at climate change and our use of fossil fuels. So the next two questions deal with these issues. Question is, how do you feel climate change has affected life in Delaware? What steps, if any, should be taken to lessen the effects of climate change? Representative Yarick.
That's a very complex question. I was just doing some math in my head of a state of 950,000 people versus a world's population of 7 billion. The climate is always changing. There is climate change. The question is how much of it is led by man-made decisions and what actions or reactions can be made to those decisions. It's a challenge because at the state line at Claymont or the state line in Delmar, the air doesn't stop from one state to the other, and the winds coming over the Chesapeake Bay don't stop at state borders either. We also have to look at how a competitive or uncompetitive situation this will do for our economic development and job creation. If we continue to raise the level of our portfolio standard for renewable energies, we are at a disadvantage, not just to regional opportunities for job creation, but nationally and internationally. So yes, the climate is always changing. How much of it is led by man? That's a tough question. How much of it is impacted by 950,000 people versus 7 billion? I think we need to look at that in a very practical way.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. Mr. Kufariji.
Yes, you know, the world has certainly changed quite a bit, and I think hopefully we're getting better at promoting renewable energy sources to reduce the carbon footprint that's out there. You know, we now have electric cars. You know, we have you know, vehicles that run on natural gas, which helps reduce the burning of fossil fuels. So as technology continues to develop, you know, we're using wind energy. As they become more efficient and from a cost perspective, I think we would see a reduction in fossil fuels, and that obviously would be great for, it would do a couple of things to Mr. Yarick's point. Then you end up with a good economy. It might actually help the economy out because now you create new businesses off of the efficiencies that are being generated, or new companies bringing out new products that provide energy efficiency and makes all of our lives easier and our breathing easier.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. The next question actually this was a lead-in to the next question, and it has to do with the renewable portfolio standard. What is your stance on renewable energy for Delaware, and specifically the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, a regulation that requires the increased production of energy from renewable energy sources, such as wind, solar, biomass, and geothermal? We'll start with Mr. Kufariji on this one.
So I'm all for increasing the levels of renewable energy that we're able to generate and produce, but we got to make sure that from a financial perspective that they're efficient enough that regular everyday persons can afford them. the current problem is it seems like that we tend to have some of the new energy sources, but when you look at the cost to produce them and to make them commercially available to the public, they're cost prohibitive. I support anything that increases and reduces the carbon footprint, but at the same time, I do want to make sure that our citizens are not being tasked and overburdened with the cost of the production of whatever that energy efficient system would be. So I would look out for the consumer first, and hopefully that energy system will be able to be cost effective enough for regular everyday people to afford.
Thank you, Mr. Kufarici. Representative Yarick.
I oppose the current standard, that I would absolutely 100% oppose any increase into the portfolio adjustment. A couple points. One, the cost of energy in Newcastle County is 15 to 20% higher than our surrounding states. We're at an economic disadvantage in regard to job creation as entities look to where they wanted to have their business. A second, Bloom Energy is sufficient enough of a debacle of what was put into place towards consumers and commercial customers for Delmarva Power for close to $250 million that they are paying to subsidize for what may not even be a green energy supplement. I believe that the markets are going to be able to provide the best possible opportunity. I'm fortunate to where I live, where I'm a Delaware co-op member, and they provide, I think, the lowest price electricity in the state of Delaware, and they're not mandated to do it. They do it by good practices, being efficient, and they are also very green towards their energy development.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. We turn now to access to information. Is Delaware's Freedom of Information Act working well for the public? What changes, if any, would you suggest for FOIA or the Freedom of Information Act? We'll start with Representative Yarick.
I can think of one immediate change that was legislation brought forward to remove the FOIA requirement to learn how legislators spend their community transportation funding money. That it's the public's money, it's the Delaware state taxpayers' money. That similar, they don't have to FOIA to see the operating budget or the capital budget or the grant and aid budget. They shouldn't have to FOIA to see how we're spending tax dollars in regard to road improvements, sidewalk improvements. Second, I think any sort of sale of public property, whether it be land or other assets, should be part of a much easier FOIA process, a very open-ended process. I think anybody, regardless of Republican or Democrat, doesn't want to ever feel like they're being taken advantage of by their government. And we need to do a better job of having that access to open information for all the government. So those are two specific ones. One, removing the requirement for CTF, and then two, for any sale of government assets, whether it be land, cars, should have it much more easier to see the bidding process and what the property was sold for.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. Mr. Kufarici.
Yes, I think we have FOIA laws in place now. I would assume they're sufficient, because sometimes I'm in my work role, I'm a recipient of those requests, and I have to respond to them within 15 working days to make sure that I answer the questions that are being asked of us. The state has also done a good job in terms of being able to put out all the expenses for every state agency. The Delaware checkbook is on Delaware Online, so you can pretty much get out there and see what people are spending. To Mr. Yarick's point around the CTF funding, I agree. I think if any funding that comes out of from taxpayers should be readily accessible to the community to be able to see what was done with their funding, as well as to make sure that absolutely when the state acquires property, or when government acquires property, and when they dispose of them, we absolutely, as community members, as citizens, should be able to see what those dollars look like and what those transactions look like.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kufarici. The next question is more of a philosophical question. It's your legislative philosophy. So I'll read it to you. Can you give an example where your own views or vote on an issue would differ from your party's official platform. How do you balance loyalty to your party, your donors, your constituents, and your own conscience when they conflict? What is your philosophy of legislating? And we'll start out with Mr. Kufariji this time.
Um, I try to be my own person. I think things through. I sit back. I try to understand all the sides to a story before I jump in and say this is where I'm going or this is not where I'm going with it. I think over the years I've done well standing on my own, regardless of how much pressure people try to put on me to do things the way they think it is the right way to do it. So when it comes to legislation, I'm making legislation, I will stand on what I believe is right. And sometimes what I believe is right may be in conflict with what the people that put me in the office may enjoy or like. But guess what I want to do? Put it out to them and say, hey, this is my opinion on this subject, but I work for you. You tell me how you think it should go, and hopefully solicit more from my constituency around those subjects. So my big desire is always to make sure, stand up for what I believe is right, but then make sure that I also meet and serve the interest of the community that sent me to the.
Thank you, Mr. Kufariji. Representative Yarick.
I think having a core set of principles and convictions, believing in the power of the individual, believing in self-governance, opposing words such as mandates from government down to people. In regard to how I may have differed from certain party affiliations, that I voted for certain criminal justice reform bills that out of my party, I was perhaps in the minority, but I just felt it was good governing, is good legislation that was needed. In regard to serving the individuals in the 34th District, I think my commitment to ongoing town halls, open communication, being able to listen, being engaged in the community outside of the building, allowed me to very accurately represent the individuals in the 34th District. Of course, there are going to be certain issues where people will disagree with, but overall, I think people have entrusted me over these last 6 years with their votes in regard to those convictions and principles of believing in individual self-governance, trying to keep government as small as possible, and eliminate those words such as mandates of dictating what people need to do by their government.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. The final question is also a philosophical question, and I'm going to allow you 2 minutes to answer it, since it might be more complicated than it sounds. Basically, what motivated you to seek or continue in this office? And we'll start out with Representative Yarick.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. That 6 years ago, a little bit earlier in the year than this, that the individual who held a position, a good man, had served well, have a lot of respect for him. However, I just felt that there were certain issues that were left unattended to. Some basic customer service issue, following up with the constituent concerns. And just there was an opportunity where after talking it over with my wife, we took a challenge, we took a risk. I just felt that we could do better. It wasn't a popular decision by any means, challenging an incumbent. However, by working hard and being engaged in the community for the prior 20 years led to success there. So what led me to do is I thought I could make a difference in this community, in this state. That's why I still continue to do this. I think I represent the people throughout the district as well as the state in regard to the principles that I just mentioned in the prior question. That it's an honor and a privilege, and I never take it lightly, that we are here to serve the people. So looking back, what led me to get into it, I just felt that we could do a little bit better. And over the time, from being engaged in the community, having open communication, voting how the district I expect and wants me to vote on the more dicier legislation, I think I continue to do that and look forward to another 2 years in the role.
Thank you, Representative Yarick. Mr. Kufariji.
Yes, one of my biggest passions, apart from the fact that I'm in this space, is education. I look at our education system and I see, I think the biggest challenge in education is the idea that, again, we have a whole bunch of people that make decisions for educators. And most of them, I don't believe, have any training in education. And our children are suffering for those decisions. There's so many obstacles. And again, you have government, you have philanthropists. Everybody wants to say, hey, I wanna make education better. But none of them understand what it takes to educate. None of them understand the complexities of what the administration in school districts have to deal with, or in the Department of Education. So my interest is in, let's remove the obstacles. Let's remove things that get in the way of kids getting proper education. Let's not chase after test scores. Let's actually train our children so they actually know and they can keep up with what's going on in the world. That drives me. That I have so much interest and passion for that. Let's make sure that obstacles get out of our administrators' ways. Let's make sure obstacles are removed from the Department of Education. Let's remove legislations that obstruct, and let's let professionals handle education. And for the people that want to give money, feel free, send us your money, but don't tell us how to educate people, how to educate students. We want to make them grow up and be successful and contributing members of the society. So let's let the people that were trained to do it. I'm interested in building strong communities for people. I want to make sure that healthcare for children, for seniors, for infants are provided and available. And I want to make sure that when it's time to make decisions, that people are not always left with, the brunt of the economy needs to be managed by, or needs to be handed back to the normal people, when businesses tend to, they're building the economy, so we don't need them. We don't need them to contribute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kufriji. I think we got the gist of your opinion on your philosophy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have come to the close of tonight's program. Let me thank both the viewing public and the candidates for your involvement in this learning experience. Our gratitude also goes to the League of Women Voters, AAUW, the Central Delaware branch of NAACP, the Pan-Hellenic Council, and Restoring Central Dover for supporting this example of grassroots democracy. These debates can be accessed by on the League websites and Facebook on Friday, October 23rd. Please note that the Kent County League's next debate will take place tomorrow, when we will hold a virtual forum for Kent County Levy Court Commissioner, Districts 1, 3, and 5. And Kent County Clerk of the Peace. The League of Women Voters of Delaware will present a virtual candidate debate for U.S. Senator and U.S. Representative next week on October 28th, and for Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Insurance Commissioner on October 29th. Please send your candidate questions to kcdelwv@gmail.com. I will repeat that, kcdelwv@gmail.com. These debates are being recorded using Zoom. No public is in attendance. Recording of these events may not be used without the express approval of the League of Women Voters, and the League will only allow audio and/or video of this forum to be broadcast in its entirety, except by media reporting on the event. Audio and video of the federal and statewide debates will be streamed on League websites and Facebook on Friday, October 30th. Most importantly, after this, please remember to vote